The night of the gala that had once been their stage now returned like a haunting echo in Richard's mind. The chandeliers, the laughter, the sneers, all of it replayed in fragments that mocked him in his solitude. Weeks had passed since the failed deal, but the weight of it had not diminished. Instead, it pressed harder, suffocating him beneath the knowledge that his empire, his legacy, teetered on the brink. The city no longer whispered of his triumphs but of his downfall, and though he snarled at the headlines, he could not silence them. Richard sat in his study, the firelight flickering across his hardened face. Ethan entered, a phone in hand, his eyes bloodshot from too many sleepless nights. "It's worse than we thought," he muttered, placing the device on the desk. "She's gained control of the shipping contracts in Asia. Investors are abandoning us by the hour. By morning, we could lose 40% of our capital base." Richard exhaled slowly, masking the crack of panic that threatened his composure. "We'll recover," he said, though even he could hear the hollowness in his tone. "We've faced storms before." Ethan slammed his palm against the desk, his patience frayed. "This isn't a storm, it's an avalanche. And you're pretending it's a drizzle. She's outmaneuvered us, Richard. Completely." The older man rose, his frame still commanding though wearied by the weeks of strain. He stared out the tall windows at the skyline, once his empire, now a battlefield slipping from his grip. "I will not be remembered as the man who bowed to her," he growled. "If I go down, I'll drag her reputation into the ashes with me." Ethan hesitated. He had always believed in his father's power, in the inevitability of their dominance. But now he saw a man clinging to shadows, blinded by pride. "Maybe Marcus was right," Ethan whispered almost to himself. "Maybe the fight is already lost." Richard spun, his eyes flashing with fury. "Don't you dare speak his name in my house. That coward abandoned us when we needed him most." But even as he said it, he knew Marcus had not abandoned them. He had warned them. And Richard, consumed by his arrogance, had refused to listen. That evening a message arrived. Not a threat, not a declaration, but a simple press release that shook the financial world. She had secured an alliance with two of Richard's oldest rivals, men he had once crushed without mercy. Together they announced a new venture, one that dwarfed anything the Caldwell empire could hope to sustain. The timing was surgical, hours before the markets opened, ensuring that by dawn, the Caldwell fortune would plummet. Ethan read the news aloud, his voice breaking. Richard said nothing. His jaw clenched as the weight of inevitability pressed upon him. The humiliation was complete, yet strangely, it was not the loss of wealth that gutted him. It was the knowledge that she had done it without raising her voice, without striking him directly. She had defeated him by walking away and letting his own pride consume him. Marcus returned the next day, not with fanfare, but quietly, as though compelled to witness the final collapse. Richard met him in the study, eyes bloodshot. His posture still defiant though his empire lay in ruins. "Come to gloat." Richard sneered, his voice brittle. Marcus shook his head. "I came to see if there was anything left of the man I once respected." Richard's laugh was hollow, bitter. "Respect? You think she's won your respect? She didn't fight fair. She didn't face me directly. She used silence as her weapon." Marcus stepped closer, his gaze steady. "That's what you never understood. True strength doesn't always roar. Sometimes it is the refusal to be pulled into another man's game. You wanted a war of pride, and she denied you the battlefield. That is why you lost." Ethan, seated in the corner, looked between them, his loyalty torn. For the first time, he saw Marcus not as an outsider but as the only one who had spoken truth when it mattered. His father, once invincible in his eyes, now seemed like a relic, raging against a world that had moved on. Richard's voice cracked as he spat. "She humiliated me. In front of everyone." "No," Marcus replied softly. "You humiliated yourself. She only revealed what was already there." The words struck deeper than any insult. For a long moment Richard said nothing. his chest heaving with the weight of unspoken rage and despair. The silence stretched until the fire in the hearth crackled louder than any voice. At last, Richard collapsed into his chair, the fight draining from him. "So this is it," he muttered, his tone stripped of grandeur. The great Richard Caldwell, undone by a single woman's silence. Marcus did not smile, nor did he pity him. "Not undone by her," he corrected. "Undone by yourself. And that is the tragedy. You had every chance to choose differently." Ethan rose, his eyes wet with the realization that the empire he had been born to inherit was crumbling. "What do we do now?" he asked, his voice fragile, almost childlike. Richard stared into the fire, the flames reflecting in his tired eyes. For the first time he had no answer. The silence that followed was not the silence of strategy or defiance. It was the silence of defeat. And outside the Caldwell estate, the world moved on without them. Markets adjusted, alliances shifted, and new empires rose where the old one had fallen. She did not look back, for she had no need to. Their story was over, and hers had only just begun. The man who had once held cities in his grasp now sat alone in his crumbling fortress, his legacy reduced to whispers of arrogance and ruin. And though he still burned with anger, Richard Caldwell knew the truth he could never escape. She had taken nothing from him. He had given it all away. The Caldwell estate, once a fortress of unchallenged wealth, felt strangely hollow in the days that followed the collapse of the deal. Rumors had spread like wildfire across trading floors, boardrooms, and dinner tables, each retelling chipping away at the myth of their invincibility. Richard stalked the halls like a predator trapped in his own cage, while Ethan drowned himself in restless nights of calls and drinks, both men desperate to regain control of a narrative that was slipping beyond their grasp. Richard convened a crisis meeting in his private office, summoning Ethan and Marcus. The room was lined with portraits of stern-faced ancestors, each painted with the certainty of dominion, yet even those painted eyes seemed to mock him now. Richard stood by the window, staring at the city skyline as though it were an adversary. "She wants war," Richard declared without turning around. "And if it's war she's after, she'll find out who she's playing with." His voice was tight, trembling not with fear but with the rage of a man unaccustomed to losing. Ethan, seated with one leg bouncing nervously, gave a half-smile. "So we push back. Hit her where it hurts. Leak stories, twist the press, squeeze her suppliers. She'll crumble." Marcus shifted in his chair, his tone deliberate. "That will not work. Every attack will only prove her right, that you underestimate her, that you cannot see past your own pride. She is prepared for men like you. If you go down that road, you'll hand her more power." Richard finally turned, his glare sharp. "Then what do you suggest? That I bow my head to a woman who made a spectacle of me?" Marcus's calm expression did not falter. "I suggest you realize she has already beaten you, and find a way to minimize the damage before you lose everything." Ethan scoffed, running a hand through his hair. "Always the voice of reason, Marcus. But you don't understand, our name is everything. If we crawl away now, we'll never recover. We need to show strength, even if it means burning the bridge." Richard nodded, seizing on Ethan's words. "Exactly. She thinks she's untouchable, but no one is. If she wants to play this game in public, I'll strip her down to nothing. I'll remind her and the world who holds the real power." Marcus leaned forward, his voice dropping to a warning. "Be careful, Richard. Power is not what it used to be. You think you can control perception as you always have, but the world is shifting. The arrogance you call strength looks like weakness to those watching now. If you strike blindly, you won't just lose to her. You'll lose the loyalty of everyone who still follows you." The room fell into a tense silence. Richard's jaw tightened as the weight of Marcus's words pressed against the fury boiling inside him. Ethan broke the pause, trying to reclaim certainty. "So what, do nothing? Sit here while she laughs at us?" Marcus's eyes flicked between them. "You still don't see it. She isn't laughing. She isn't thinking about you at all anymore. That's the real wound. You are used to being the center of gravity, but she has stepped outside your orbit. And you can't bear that. The truth landed sharper than any insult. Richard's hands gripped the edge of his desk until his knuckles whitened. He despised the thought of irrelevance more than he despised losing money. Control was his lifeblood, and now it was slipping away in silence. Ethan rose suddenly, pacing. We have to act. Something bold, something decisive. If we show weakness, the other sharks will circle. They'll think we're finished. Richard's eyes narrowed, the flicker of an idea catching in his gaze. Not weakness. Retaliation. If she wants to destroy my reputation, I'll destroy hers first. We'll dig, expose, fabricate if we must. The world loves a scandal. Marcus shook his head, his voice sharp now. You'll destroy yourselves in the process. She doesn't need to fight back. Your desperation will expose you for what you are. Richard slammed his hand against the desk. Enough! His roar silenced the room, his authority straining against the fragility of his position. I built this empire on my terms. No one humiliates me without consequence. Not her, not anyone. Ethan's eyes gleamed with reckless approval. Then we move forward. I'll start calling the press, the influencers, the ones who owe us favors. By the end of the week, no one will be speaking her name without spitting it. Marcus rose from his chair slowly, his disappointment heavy in the air. You think you are orchestrating her downfall. What you are really doing is orchestrating your own. Every word you spread, every attack you launch, it will only confirm what she already knew about you, that you are small men with loud voices. Richard's glare followed Marcus as he walked to the door. Careful, Steele. You speak as though you side with her. Marcus paused, his hand on the doorknob, and looked back. I side with truth. And the truth is, she doesn't need to destroy you. You are doing that yourselves. With that, he left, the heavy door closing behind him like a final judgment. Inside, Richard and Ethan stood surrounded by the silence of their own fury, the walls of their estate pressing inward. They mistook their plotting for control, not realizing that the more they schemed, the deeper they fell into the trap their arrogance had set. Outside, in the wider world, whispers grew into storms. Markets shifted, journalists circled, and allies quietly withdrew their hands. And at the center of it all, she remained still, untouched, her silence more devastating than any weapon. Richard Caldwell lit a cigar with shaking hands, staring at the glowing ember as though it were the last fragment of power he still held. Ethan stood at the window, watching the city that once bent to their will. For the first time, doubt crept into his expression. But Richard hardened his voice. This isn't over. She may think she's won, but she hasn't faced the full weight of what I can do. Yet deep within him, even as he spoke, the echo of Marcus's warning lingered. He was no longer certain who was truly being hunted, and who was already lost. The morning after the party dawned clear, but for Richard Caldwell, the sun rose only to illuminate his triumph. He sat at the head of the long dining table, sipping black coffee as though it were another victory to be consumed. Ethan slouched opposite him, nursing a headache that did not dim his grin. Both men carried the smug certainty that the night had secured their dominance. Their laughter echoed in the cavernous room, bouncing off polished marble like the applause of ghosts. Richard's phone vibrated once, a discreet signal of incoming correspondence. He ignored it at first, assuming it to be another congratulatory message, but when Marcus Steele entered the room, his expression measured and unreadable, Richard raised a brow. "What is it?" he asked, expecting some minor formality. Marcus laid a folder on the table without ceremony. "She has sent word," he said. His voice carried neither urgency nor hesitation, but something in his tone made Ethan sit up straighter. Richard flipped the folder open. Inside, printed in sharp black ink, was a single-page letter. The words were concise, direct, and lethal. She was withdrawing from the negotiations, effective immediately. There would be no deal, no merger, no $5 billion conquest. At the bottom, her signature cut across the page with the authority of a blade. Ethan blinked, then barked a laugh. This is a bluff. She's trying to play hard to make us sweat a little. She'll be back. But Marcus shook his head once. No, this is not a bluff. She has made her decision. His eyes lingered on Richard, sharp and steady. And I think you both know why. The words hung in the air like smoke. Richard's jaw tightened. Because of last night. He scoffed, though the sound cracked at the edges. You're telling me she'd throw away billions over, what? A joke. Banter at a party. Ethan leaned forward, smirking still but less certain now. She doesn't have the luxury to walk away. Not from us. We're the Coldwells. We built half the world she wants to play in. She'll come crawling back. Marcus's expression did not shift. You mistake her patience for need. She is not crawling. She is watching. And she has already calculated the cost of letting you mock her in front of your empire. His voice lowered. She has decided it is too high. Richard slammed the folder shut, his temper breaking through the thin veneer of composure. This is arrogance. She thinks she can embarrass me. Me. His fist hit the table, rattling the silverware. No one walks away from Richard Coldwell. But Ethan said nothing now, his smirk faltering as the silence stretched. He could still hear his own laughter from the night before, sharp and ugly in his memory. He remembered the way her eyes had lingered on him, calm but unyielding, as though she were already measuring the cost of his arrogance. Marcus stood, his movements deliberate. You wanted control, Richard. You demanded respect without offering it. Last night you showed her exactly how little you valued her. Now she has shown you how much power she truly holds. Richard rose as well, looming over Marcus. You think she can touch me? I've crushed bigger rivals before breakfast. Marcus's gaze was steady, his words unflinching. This is different. You are not fighting another dynasty. You are fighting a woman who built her empire by being underestimated. Every slight against her has been turned into steel. You think you can break her. You don't realize she has already broken you. Ethan swore under his breath, pacing the room now. We can fix this. A gift, an apology, a promise to respect her role. She'll see reason. Marcus shook his head. It's too late for gestures. What you did cannot be undone. Last night wasn't an accident. It was a revelation. You showed her who you truly are, and she will not tie her legacy to yours. Richard's hands clenched at his sides. For the first time in decades, a fissure of doubt ran through him. He looked at Marcus, searching for some sign of compromise, but found none. She knew what she was doing, Marcus continued, voice steady. She waited until the deal was nearly in your grasp, then pulled it away in front of the world. Everyone will hear of this, Richard. Not because she will tell them, but because silence cannot hold the weight of a $5 billion collapse. Your empire will bleed reputation, and she will not need to lift a finger. Ethan slammed a hand against the wall. So what? We do nothing. Just let her walk away. Marcus's eyes hardened. You already did everything. Last night sealed your fate. The question now is whether you learn from it, or whether you destroy yourselves trying to undo what cannot be undone. The room fell silent again, heavy with a truth neither Coldwell wanted to face. Outside the window, the morning sun blazed brighter, indifferent to their struggle. Richard finally sank back into his chair, the fight draining from his posture. He poured another glass of coffee, though his hand trembled slightly as he lifted it. $5 billion, he muttered, more to himself than to the others. Gone. Ethan leaned against the wall, his bravado hollow now. She'll regret it, he whispered, though the words sounded less like conviction and more like prayer. Marcus said nothing. He had seen men like the Caldwells before, men who mistook cruelty for strength and arrogance for destiny. Their downfall was always the same. They never believed it could happen until it already had. And yet, as he left the dining hall, Marcus knew this was only the beginning. The Caldwells' pride would not let them accept defeat quietly. They would rage, they would scheme, and they would lash out against the one woman they had underestimated. But every move they made would only dig their grave deeper. For the woman they mocked was not just withdrawing her deal. She was rewriting the balance of power, and the world would soon witness what happened when arrogance collided with dignity sharpened into justice. Crystal chandeliers blazed overhead, scattering light across a ballroom so polished it seemed to gleam with arrogance. The Caldwell mansion was no stranger to excess, but tonight the wealth on display pushed past opulence into something resembling intimidation. Waiters in white gloves glided between clusters of men in tailored tuxedos, glasses of champagne balanced with mathematical precision. To be invited here was not a privilege. It was a declaration of belonging to an inner circle that controlled far more than money. Richard Caldwell moved among the guests like a man certain the floor itself would buckle if he willed it. His broad frame carried the weight of decades at the pinnacle of finance. Every gesture, from the sharp tug of his cufflinks to the clipped greetings he offered, bore the confidence of a man accustomed to being obeyed. He paused frequently, soaking in the boughs of recognition, the subtle deference that followed him. For Richard, this party was not merely celebration. It was the prologue to conquest. Ethan Caldwell, his eldest son, was never far behind, hovering like a shadow desperate to prove it was light. Ethan wore entitlement with the same ease his father wore power. His smirk was constant, his laughter loud and calculated. Where Richard spoke with the weight of authority, Ethan spoke with mockery, the kind that thrived on weakness. He often clapped guests too firmly on the shoulder, as though every handshake was an audition for dominance. By contrast, Marcus Steele stood at the edges of the ballroom, eyes scanning the room with the precision of a soldier assessing a battlefield. His frame was lean, his posture controlled, his movements deliberate. Marcus was not a Caldwell. He was not old money, nor was he born to excess. He was there on invitation, as an advisor and partner to the woman who had, against all odds, risen into the rarefied air of billion-dollar negotiations. Marcus respected her more than any man in that room, and tonight he intended to protect that respect, even if it meant silence. She arrived without spectacle, a tall black woman dressed with understated elegance. The air shifted when she entered, though few among the Caldwell's circle admitted it. Conversations paused. Eyes lingered longer than courtesy demanded. Some watched with curiosity, others with disdain thinly veiled as amusement. To Marcus, she carried herself with a grace that belied the magnitude of what she controlled. A partnership that would decide the future of the Caldwell's empire, a $5 billion deal balanced on the fragile thread of respect. Richard greeted her with a smile sharp enough to cut glass. "You made it," he said, voice heavy with the suggestion that she should be grateful to be here at all. Ethan joined with a chuckle, adding, "And right on time, remarkable. You people do like to make an entrance." The laughter that followed was the kind only those in power share, half hidden, fully cruel. Marcus felt his jaw tighten, but he remained silent. His eyes flicked to her, gauging her reaction. She did not flinch. Instead, she returned Richard's gaze with a steady calm, as though filing away every word for future judgment. Victor Hale, one of Richard's oldest allies, approached with a drink in hand. "Richard tells me you're the one holding the keys to our little empire," he said, his tone playful but laced with dismissal. "I suppose it's refreshing to see diversity in the boardroom." The pause before the word was deliberate. Ethan smirked and added, "Novelty never lasts, though. Not in our world." Marcus felt heat rise in his chest. He knew these men, predators fattened on arrogance, incapable of imagining a future where their power waned. He glanced at her again. Her lips curved into the faintest smile, not of amusement, but of patience sharpened into steel. She excused herself with grace, drifting toward the far side of the ballroom where the music swelled louder, her poise untouched. The Caldwells laughed after her departure, raising glasses in mock toasts. 5 billion gentlemen, Richard declared, voice booming. And still they come crawling for our approval. Imagine what they'd give if they weren't so proud. Ethan leaned back, arrogance dripping from every syllable. We'll close the deal, and she'll thank us for the privilege. Marcus listened, each word a nail hammered into the coffin of their certainty. He did not laugh. His silence was a blade heathed, waiting. He thought of her eyes, calm and unyielding, and knew the Caldwells were blind to what they had already lost. The night stretched on, music and laughter weaving together in a tapestry of decadence. To the Caldwells, it was a celebration of victory already secured. To Marcus, it was a performance of hubris, one that would not survive the dawn. He walked to the balcony for air, the cool night biting at his skin. Inside, the chandeliers burned, oblivious to the storm gathering just beyond their golden glow. When the guests departed and the laughter faded into silence, Richard poured himself a final drink. Ethan lounged across the room, half drunk and brimming with confidence. "She'll come around," Ethan said, slurring slightly. "They always do. Money speaks louder than pride." Richard raised his glass, a toast to arrogance. Marcus lingered in the doorway, watching them, silent witness to the blind certainty of men who mistook mockery for victory. He knew what they did not, that the woman they had dismissed held not only the pen but the power. The party ended with the Caldwell men triumphant in their own minds, oblivious to the fracture already spreading beneath their empire. Marcus stepped into the night, the sound of their laughter chasing him into the darkness. In his chest burned a certainty as cold as the stars above. They had mocked the wrong person. The stage was set. The battle had already begun, though the Caldwells could not yet see it. Tomorrow would bring reckoning, and Marcus, for all his silence tonight, would be there to witness the fall.